All right, let's start breaking down this banjo lesson that's going to give us one of my favorite movable chord exercises. So let's break down what we're talking about. So movable chords are chords that don't have any open strings. Those come in handy when you want to start moving things up higher up the neck, or if you want to play more advanced chords, or if you want to move something from one key to another. If we don't have any open strings, it becomes a lot easier to move chords around. So I would call this maybe an advanced beginner lesson, maybe a 3 or 4 out of 10 on the difficulty level. You're going to need to be familiar with some of the basics, but I think if you're a little bit more advanced, some of this might be a review as well. But where this will really come in handy is in learning songs you've never heard before. So let's say you go to a jam session, someone calls a song you've never heard before. These exercises I'm about to show you can be very helpful in keeping you in a home base where you can learn the song without getting flustered and without having to jump around the neck a whole bunch. So that's what we're going to practice on this lesson. Let's start breaking it down. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to use the 3 main movable chord shapes, the F shape, the D shape, and the bar shape. And if you're not familiar with those, I would check out another lesson I did called F shape, D shape, and bar shape exercises. Some of that will be crossover with this, but you really can't get too much practice with these movable chord shapes. A fair amount of it, honestly, is just memorization. So what we're going to do for this exercise is we're going to find the 4 chords that are very common for most bluegrass songs. The 1 chord, which is our root home chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, and the 6 minor. So not every song is going to contain those 4 chords, but a majority of bluegrass songs and folk songs are going to use those 4 chords. So remember, when you're learning a new song, it's good to actually initially put yourself in a little box, right? Because if you just said, hey, I'm learning a new song, it could be any chord out there, right? It's so easy to get overwhelmed. But if you figure out what key the song is in, I immediately narrow down to, I'm going to start with those 4 chords. Now, is every song going to use those 4 chords? No. But again, I'm narrowing my search to the most likely candidates, and that's going to help me not get flustered when I'm trying to learn a new song, especially in a jam when there's a lot of stuff going on. Super easy to get flustered and forget a basic chord that you know, right? That's the other reason why jumping around, too, is also more difficult, because when the pressure is on, it gets harder to jump around like that. So let's start with the F-shaped chord. I'm just going to do 3-finger chords to start. So let's start with the key of G. So I'm going to put my middle finger on the 4th fret of the 3rd string. I'm going to put my index finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, and my pinky up on the 5th fret of the 1st string. If you want the full chord, your ring finger can go down to the 5th fret of the 4th string. But for this example, let's just leave that finger off. I do that a lot in practice, like if I was doing like maybe a forward reverse roll, or whatever roll you're working on. If you're not playing that 4th string, it's just nice to just leave that finger off and give yourself a little bit of relief. So that's the F-shaped chord. So let's pretend that that is our root home chord. So that's going to be the chord that we're usually going back to at the end, and a lot of times starting on. Usually you start on the root chord and end on the root chord. Not always, but most times. Again, remember, you're trying to narrow your search down so you don't get overwhelmed. Okay, so that's our main 1 chord. So that's the 1. Now let's find our 4 chord without moving as little as possible, right? Because we have an F-shaped C chord way up here, right? But then I have to do that big jump, right? So that gets a little harder at a fast speed. Our 4 chord is C. So you probably, obviously, if you play down here, you've got G, C, D is our 5, and 6 minor is E minor in this case. So those are, like I said, are the 4 main chords that you're going to want to use when you're playing a song. And like I said, it's not always going to be those chords, but those are good ones to start with. So we have our G here. If we slide we're going to keep our pinky where it is. Our pinky is going to be kind of our anchor. We're going to slide our middle finger up to the 5th fret, and we're going to put our ring finger on the 5th fret of the 2nd string. So now we have 5, 5, and 5. 5th fret's all the way down. That's our C. So we're right here. We just have a C right here, right? So instead of having to jump up and do that, now we can just go like that. So like I said, if I was learning a new song that I've never learned or never heard before, right? And I know it's in the key of G, I'm going to hang out in this shape, and the 4 chord's usually going to probably be the first one I want to try and go to. So I'm going to just start listening for that change and just seeing if I can hear that little bit of movement. You know, you might stay on it for a little bit and then you can go back. Doesn't really matter what roll you're doing, you can strum, you know. Okay, so that's our 1 to 4. So G to C. If we go back to our G, now we're going to slide our pinky down to the 4th fret, and we're going to flip our middle and index fingers. So they just flip strings. So your index finger goes up, your middle finger goes down toward the floor. They flip. So that's our D. If you want the full D, your ring finger can play on the 4th fret. If you want the full chord of this, you can also get this 5th fret on the low string. You might see it sometimes like this. But in this example, like I said, just to not have to do so much flipping, I just slide those fingers forward. And if I want to play the low string, I can mash my middle finger down, something like that as well. So we have G up to C, G, D. My pinky pretty much stays down the entire time. So you could practice G to D, and then maybe to C, and then G, right? You can mix them up in any order you want, or G, C, D, G, or G, C, G, C, D. You really just want to test yourself, and like I said, a lot of this is just memorization and just repetition. What I recommend, what that worked for me, is saying the chords out loud. It kind of sounds silly, but it was helpful for me just to remember them. The other thing you can do is just practice your ear training and listening to how those chords sound and how it resolves back to G, right? So that's the 1, 4, and 5 chord. Those are going to be the first 3 chords that I'm looking for whenever I'm learning a new song and I figure out what key it's in. The 4th chord, the 6 minor, is called the relative minor. So that's another one you might use a lot. In this case, it's really easy. All you have to do is take your ring finger and put it on the 5th fret of the 2nd string. Your other 2 fingers stay down. Your middle finger and pinky stay down. So you can slide up to C, E minor, D, G, right? So now you have basically all your 4 main chords right here, and you really don't have to move, you only have to move 1 fret at the most. So that's very helpful, right? Because if I did it this way, I would have to slide around and change shapes. It's a lot more movement, right? And it's not that you never want to play it with the same shape, but you can see just how much more work you're creating for yourself. So I'll show you a bunch of exercises we can do once we get these shapes down. But those are the main shapes working out of the F shape, right? So I've got my 4, 6 minor, 5, 1, right? Mix them up in any order you can. G to D, E minor, C, you know, G, E minor, D, C, any way you can. I'm trying to resist the urge to lift my fingers up, and I'm keeping my fingers down as much as possible. I'm just thinking this is a home base that I can work out of, right? Okay, so that's position 1. That's the F shape. If we go up 1, 2, 3, 4 frets and flip our index and middle finger, that's the D shape G chord, right? So just like we were doing the 5 chord down here, it's that same shape now up at 7, 8, and 9. So that becomes our home chord. So our 4 chord now is if you slide your pinky up 1 fret and then flip your 2 fingers. That's our 4. So now we have 1, 4, 1, 4, 1. Our 5 is you can either bar here, which is one way to do it, or you could slide down and do it that way too. So your pinky would slide down 2 frets, and then your other fingers take over, which is just this shape here. So, like I said, all the shapes are based out of these three: F shape, D shape, and bar. And you're just using different combinations, right? You can either use your first finger, or you can slide down and do it this way. Either way. So you have 1, 4, 1, 5, or G, C, G, D. Go back to your G. If you add your ring finger on the 9th fret of the 3rd string, that's your 6 minor. So you got 6 minor, 5, 4, 1. Just mix them up however you can. Usually just end back on the G, right? End back on the root chord. That's the other thing. If you're ever in doubt, just stay on the root chord, the home chord, and kind of get your bearings. So that's why it's really important in these exercises to try and keep your fingers down as much as possible, right? That's just going to kind of help with the flow of your chords. It's going to make it sound a lot less choppy while you're kind of figuring out what's going on. So that's the 1, 4, 5, and 6 minor out of this shape. Okay, we got one more to learn and then the pattern starts over. So now we're up at the 12th fret, which is our bar shape. So that's our bar shape G chord. So you can do it this way or this way, either way. I would do it this way for this one. And then we put our middle finger on the 13th fret, our pinky up on the 14th fret. That's our 4 chord. So we're here, and we slide up. And then our 5 is you go back down here. So your pinky comes back down to the 12th fret, your index finger goes to the 10th fret, and your middle finger goes to the 11th fret. So you have 12, 10, 11, which is your F-shaped D chord, right? So your G is here, C is here, G, D. Or you can do it all with your pinky, like I said. So that's 1, 4, 5, 1. The 6 minor is you have to use your index finger to bar it, and then you put your pinky up on the 14th fret. So you have, starting from the 3rd string, 12, 12, 14. So you're here, add your pinky, that's the 6 minor. Add your middle finger on the 13th fret, that's the 4, 5, 1, right? Mix them up in whatever order you can. It's just good practice. Okay? So those are the 3 shapes, and then it actually would start over again up at the 17th fret, which is your F-shaped G again. And then the same pattern starts over, right? You can actually do it way up here too with your... You don't have another higher bar chord way up there, but the pattern works the same, right? Okay, so that's the first thing, is just figure out those shapes, and then I'll show you let me show you how to move it around, and then I'll show you a couple exercises I would do. Okay? So first thing you can do is just take that shape and just move it around wherever you want. You can move it up 2 frets to A, right? Do the same pattern. So 1, 4, 1, 5, 6 minor, 4, 1, 5. You know, you can do it here, here, right? So all those same shapes apply. 6 minor here, 4, 1, 5. You don't even have to know what the actual real chords are. That's what's nice. In this case, the chords are A, D, A, E, and then F sharp minor. But let's say you didn't even know what the chords were. Let's say you didn't even know what key you were in. What you can do is you can start with your F shape, just move it around until you find one that sounds good. Maybe it sounds good right there. Now you've got your 1, 4, 1, 5. You don't even have to know what key you're in. In that case, it'd be E flat, right? But that's that's what's nice about these patterns is you don't technically even have to know what it is. You know, you could play it in a harder key like a B flat, right? So you're now at the 8th fret. You got your 4, 1, 5, 6 minor, up to your D shape, 1, 6 minor, 4 here, 5, or here, or 6 minor, right? I'm just taking that same idea, and I like either calling out the numbers or the real chords. You could really depends on what skill in the moment you're trying to practice, right? But I'm always using those 4 main chords as my home base, right? If I need to explore out, I might eventually need to do that. Some songs, like I said, are going to use more chords than just the main 4. But remember, it's about focusing and taking an educated guess in the moment. And you want to increase the odds that your guess is going to be right. So instead of choosing any random chord, pick one of those 4 and you have the best chance of being right. Like I said, it's not automatic that you're going to be able to learn every song the moment you hear it and just play it perfect right away, right? That's not reasonable. That's not a true good goal to strive for because it's not realistic. But you might be able to get a lot of the chords the first time. You might miss 1 or 2, and that's where you can say, okay, those 2 that I missed are definitely outside of those main 4 because 1, they're going to sound quite a bit different to your ear. And if you know those 4 and you're good at hearing how they sound, you're going to hear that those other 2 chords are outside of those main 4. So, like I said, it's really important to focus, right? Because otherwise it's too many variables and you're just going to get overwhelmed and you're just going to freeze up. Or at least that's what happens to me when I get in a jam. So I use these, like I said, as a lifeline. I'm using these positions to keep myself grounded. You know, I'm basically keeping my pinky down the entire time so I don't lift everything up and lose my position. So the other thing you can do with this is, let's say you have a long section on 1 chord. You could also go through each of the shapes but play only 1 chord, right? So I could do a 1 here, I could slide up to my next 1, and I could slide up to my next 1 here. Or go high, right? So that's another thing I could do is I could do it like forward reverse roll, slide up, so something like that. You could take each of the 1 chords from each of the shapes and now make a little thing. Or you could do, like I said, the 4s from each shape, 5s, 6 minor, you know. So, like I said, you can either hang out in 1 shape if you don't feel like moving around and you just kind of want to get your bearings. But let's say you have a long section of G. Now that's another skill you could practice is going F shape G, D shape G, bar shape G, F shape, you know, that pattern repeats. That F shape, D shape, and bar shape exercises lesson has a whole bunch of those ideas that you can practice. That's a very common way to play backup or leads to a song. But just keep that in your mind. We're just working out of those same shapes. You know, you can do it in C up here, F, you know, C, G, A minor, right? You got all your chords. You can do it in D down here, right? D, G, D, A. Your 6 minor in this case is B minor, right? So you got your D here, G. And like I said, once you get it down, a lot of the chords are used the same, but in a different situation. So for example, right, if I'm in G up here, I've got my 1, 4, 1, 5, right? But if I want to play now in the key of D, now that becomes my 1, and this G becomes my 4, right? D, and then I'm down to A for my 5. So so see how I'm using these two shapes now in a different situation. It's either a 1 to a 5, G to D, or it's a 1 to a 4, right? Same here actually too. So a lot of those chords are used in multiple situations. So that's why the numbers are very helpful, and I'm always reverting back to what's my root 1 chord, because that's setting up how all the other chords work together, right? So send me an email or post a comment if you have any questions. I definitely do not expect you to get this all in one sitting. I would use these as a short little warm-up exercises, test your memory, and then put it down. Practice something else, practice a song. Maybe in the middle of a practice session, pick it up again, see if you can do the shapes. Like I said, a lot of it is just memorization and ear training. Pick it up, try your shapes quick, you know. And then put it back down. I found for me, it's the more you test yourself and you're testing that recall, that's what's going to allow you to recall it quickly in a jam session, right? It's not practicing it for an hour and then not thinking about it for a week. That, for me, does not work with these kind of memorization things. For me, it's practice it for 2 minutes, recall it for 2 minutes, then go work on something else. Then come back to it and see if I can recall it again. It's about finding that spot in your brain that you're storing that information. So you're really just practicing that recall more than like the techniques of it, because the techniques aren't that challenging, but it's really, can you recall it in the moment? I think that's the challenge for this kind of stuff. So send me a question or a comment if something isn't making sense. Hopefully this helps you out when you're in a jam session and you need to learn a new song on the fly. All right, good luck and keep picking.